couple of initial notes. Today's meeting has been live streamed. So one of the notes that I've been given by the administrators is just to make sure that you're using the mics, just so people can hear okay, those who are listening online. And I'm also obliged to remind you that the local government decision-making affords no protection to members, council officers, and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be scandalous. Okay, I'll call for apologies. I did have Jacinta there, but you're here now, so. And I understand that Mark and Lorena, we're on their way, but there's been plane issues. They may be too, well, they're already online, so they're joining us online. Kia ora. Any other apologies at all? No. Should I call for a mover? Sorry,
Oh, just Rana Africa. She was supposed to attend this meeting, but she's sent her apologies in.
Second by cheerleader. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Okay, there's no public forum today. Sorry, I've just been reminded that I can't vote, so in terms of that movement, so we've got Kevin as the Councillor Winters as the seconder. Right, we'll move to declarations of interest, conflicts of interest. Hearing none, continue on. Minutes from the previous meeting. So I'll take them as being read. Are there any amendments to those minutes? Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on page 13, there was going to be in terms of the review, there was going to be a report back from the June 23 meeting, and I hadn't received that yet, because on the next page, in terms of the recommendations, number 2, on page 14, we were going to have to receive an appointment panel, independent panel, by electronic email for endorsement prior to the June 23 meeting, and haven't received that email yet, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering what's happening to the independent review, where we're up to. And then on page 16, after quite a bit of discussion regarding the targeted rate, aka for Eddie Rotorua, we asked the 3 CEOs to find a way forward. Subsequently to that, Minister Parker wrote to us with an 11th May meeting, and I'd like that letter tabled, Mr. Chairman, so that it sort of, it's his response as the Minister for the Environment to say no to the 10 million going to Rotorua. And I think Helen's got a copy, the people have got a copy. I'd like that tabled, Mr. Chairman, as part of the minutes, because it's sort of, it's the response from the Minister in terms, because we were going to write to the Minister for a way forward, and that's his response, So I'd just like that tabled. And then on page 17, it talks about a variation to extend the Māori to Māori Border Jobs for Nature contract that had been submitted to the Department of Conservation on this program would continue until June 2024. My understanding is the Jobs for Nature is ceasing, so I just want to know from that, have they got their funding until June 2024? Because it puts a sort of kibosh on the program if Jobs for Nature is ceasing. So just an update on that. And I think that's it from me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. So in terms of the first matter you raised around the strategy group independent panel, Hyman will be giving an update today, so I don't have to address the matter. Except the letter that we've tabled, so happy for that to be tabled already has. We could potentially pick up that data somewhere on the agenda. And then the number 3, Haimana, do you mind just giving an update on the Jobs for Nature? Is that in your agreement?
So
So the Jobs for Nature funding that's been got through already, so we're already in the process of acknowledging that we have that.
Oh, good, so they've agreed to it.
Yeah.
Thank you, very good.
And Mr. Chair, I understand that you're replacing Nikki. Can you just elaborate a little more on that?
Tēnā tātou. Katoa ia kera ka mihi ki te. Kia tātou katoa I tēnei ata. Ko ai tēnei, ai mora tēnā I te ingoa. Iwi, katoa I te tai awhiti. Te kia whakairoa, tātou mama. Tātou pāpā, te ringo mora whakapapa ki no te tai awhiti. Ki o tō ui pō atu, auiti, tai atu nā ki o tō ui mai waile. Mea roko ngā hononga, ki o tō te Arawa. Kei te tāwata pāpā, te tai ki o tō tūwhare toa. Tauhanga rā te mauna. Hoi anō ko te hononga ki o tō te Arawa. Te tai te whānau, te nahu ki o tō Rotorua. Ko mai pāpā tārai. Tuarua, te hononga ki o tō tūhanga. Ko te whānui te ana ko ngā pahanga. Taki I ngā tūruhi, tētahi I mārena I te whānau rubric, tēnā atu ki te whānau wātene. Tēnei ngā mihi, e tātou, tēnā tātou. Yeah, there was a little bit about me. I've just filled in Nikki's role as the interim environment manager at this stage. She left 2 weeks ago. And just picking up the portfolio at the moment and trying to get the feet under the team. Yeah, I think that's the answer to your question.
Yes, apologies from my end. I did make a note to introduce Hovana, but I didn't do that, so kia ora. Okay, I think we've got another question from Mayor Tapson.
Kia ora, and thank you very much through you, Chair. And my apologies, I'm not there in person. I'm still on maternity leave, but given the importance of this meeting, I wanted to ensure I join online. Sorry, just regarding the minutes and tabling the letter of the Minister, technically minutes are only meant to be approved to ensure that they are true and correct. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate to be tabling a letter that happened after the meeting. If that letter was known during the time of the meeting that it would be given, then that would be a different situation. I think we'll have a different discussion. However, under standing orders and usual governance practices, minutes should only be confirming what occurred at the meeting. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate to include that as part of the minutes.
Can I change my resolution, Mr. Chairman? We received the letter from Minister Tapson. Sorry, David Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Waters. I was going to the staff the appropriate way. I acknowledge maybe we can't take it as part of the minutes. Just from a formality, being that how do we receive it?
We can receive it just with the information.
Okay, yeah.
It's actually different.
Okay, does that require a resolution?
It's just for information all the time.
Thank you, Chair. So you made the comment that we would discuss this later. And I think if we're going to be formal in terms of process, in terms of the agenda items, we skipped over items not on the agenda. So could I request formal? See this letter, have discussion about that in format of items on the agenda. Items not on the agenda, part of the agenda today. And I'm saying, if you can't receive this as part of the last meeting, then can we put this item on the agenda as part of items not on the agenda to discuss? Because I agree with your sentiment that we probably need to discuss it. Your call, Chair.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, and apologies that I didn't cite that agenda. So can you just guide me in terms of whether that requires a resolution? So can I have a mover and a seconder that we address the letter from the Minister? So moved by Chair Leader, seconded Councillor Winters. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay. I think I saw another hand online.
Morena koutou. Apologies we couldn't be there in person this morning. I understand there was quite a bit of bad weather last night, which stopped our plane from landing. So really unfortunate because I wanted to introduce Mark. Apologies, it's a bit hard to hear at times, but I just wanted to note in the minutes also, I was in attendance, but in the list on the front, it hasn't got me attending as well. So if we could just add my name to that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. Make that amendment. Okay. Any further amendments to the minutes? Can I call for a mover and seconder of the minutes, please? He moved. Councillor Brown seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Aye. Against? Carries. Okay. I'll move to our first report. So 8.1, management of risk associated with the impact of climate change on lake levels. So understand there's going to be a presentation by Stavros and Chris, sorry.
Morena koutou. Stavros and I have been working on climate change risks together for a while, and we thought it was time. In fact, I think we had a discussion before Christmas about this. We thought it was time to bring that to the strategy group and see what the direction is from this table on where the strategy group members might want to collaborate on planning for climate change. Since then, of course, we've had a lot of rain and with lake levels this year. So we put this together, and apologies it was a bit of a late item, but we put this together to say the time to act is now. We want to start the climate change conversation around lake levels in the first instance, but I think, well, my view at least is we should have a collaboration that endures beyond that into the future. So the report is very brief, so just the recommendations there, and the next steps were our idea of what should go ahead, but we appreciate your input into that. And so, Stavros, if you've got any comments on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Moderator, I think it's just elaborate a little bit on what Chris' introduction was at. As we're all aware, over the last 12 to 18 months, and the forecasts remain the same. We have experienced significant rainfall. If you compare what we have received in the last 12 months against our annual average, it's 2 or 3 times more than our annual average. Those impacts of that rainfall, which according to climate change predictions become happen or development, leads us to identify that extremely rainfall events have a significant impact on cluster of considerations, including rural, streams, urban systems, housing, lake facilities, and so on, and therefore the whole system of managing rainfalls and drainage needs to be reviewed in that context. Since the April 21 strategy group meeting, obviously when I have signaled that the need for us to able to discuss joint approaches to how we address those forecasted impacts and effects on the climate change. Of course, we had events at Rotorua and Rotorua. We collaborated with that to provide relief and assistance where possible, because in reality there's not a lot of immediate actions we can take to alleviate the effects of high lake levels. However, those situations there demonstrates, I think, very clearly that unless we recognize those impacts and effects, and unless we start thinking the long-term horizon ahead of us, what is likely to happen in the future, we'll continue to face these events in a way that will have adverse impacts on our communities, our economic activity, on our well-being of our communities, on our aspiration of our communities, on the cultural grounds, and in terms of economic grounds, and therefore those forecasts require a collective approach because the system is a system. It comprises flows from rural areas, from the urban side, accumulation, lake levels management, downstream effects. We don't have the answers to that at this point in time. But every action we take, there are intended and unintended consequences. So the prudent action and our statutory responsibilities as local government actually requires us to be cognizant of these risks and hazards, identify them, form the potential solutions and actions, evaluate these actions against a whole set of multi-criteria, and report to our respective government boards, which you are part of, to consider potential mitigation options going forward. So the joint approach Chris outlined there, together with our partners, the Arawa Trust, will obviously have a significant component of the whole process, and other interested groups need to be involved in the process, because whatever we do in the long term, we need to be cognizant that the community looks upon us as a group to work together to identify and try to mitigate these issues as best as we can. And we cannot do that on a short-range approach. It has to be done on a long-range approach, and all options need to be assessed and evaluated, and then gradually reported to our government bodies or process in our long-term plan. I think that's the nature of this conversation, and I think I look forward to work with my colleagues in that direction.
Thank you, Stavros. I'll take questions from
Yeah, thank you, Stavros and Chris, and for the report. Mr. Chairman, on page, well, it's got 2 here, but it's 22. The resolutions 1 to 5. I'm happy to move for those, Mr. Chairman, for that as a way forward. And Regional Council is fully supportive of this working group, and we'd like to nominate myself, Councillor Malcolm Campbell, to be on that working group. We've already discussed this, so we think it's a good mix of 2 councillors from Regional Council. So I'd just like that included in the working group, not part of 4 business as chairman. But this is big. Can I also congratulate Phil Thomas on chairing the Rotorua community meeting a couple of weeks ago, Phil. That could have been a really difficult session to chair, and I think you did it admirably. And I think people went away comfortable, well, not comfortable, but just more about being assured that all the parties are going to work together in terms of finding solutions. So this working party is going to do that. But congratulations, Phil. Could we part of that your meeting, Phil? And I know you've put the minutes and questions on Facebook. Could we just have a copy of those questions and answers on the minutes as well? Because I think, the more people find out about the issues that people are facing, the better it is. And if we could have those minutes on our minutes as well, just for information purposes, Mr. Chair, because I think there's a lot of good answers there from the respective groups that need to be aware of it. So I'm happy to move, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to put in Councillor Campbell and myself on that move, just information minutes. And congratulations to Phil. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. I just want to support to Phil. Thank you for taking the meeting. In terms of the notes from that meeting, if they could be circulated to members.
Yep.
Okay, and that we note Regional Council presentation. Okay, great. Questions? I'll go Taro first. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
looking at the strategy group, totally agree, obviously, part of organisations, but just want to sort of emphasise, obviously, the importance of the connections to the community and also to the iwi out there. I mean, around those particular lakes, the other significant landowners, and therefore are going to be significant partners in the solution. So I'm assuming that those connections will get open, likewise with the community and fill this particular role. Thanks for the answer to that.
So I'll come back to your point around iwi and community input.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora tātou. Well, thank you to councillors from both councils who came along to the meeting the other night. Since it was mentioned, it was really great to have you there and have your support and have the support of both councillors' staff there, and both councils' staff have been working really hard on this. For me and for staff, it hasn't just been one meeting, actually, it's been a month and a half of probably daily phone calls with people, a lot of very distressed people out there. Look, I fully support this report and support the resolutions. I would just like to add a couple of things, because all our lakes are suffering, not just Rotorua, Agu. Our lakes that actually have outlets, so Rotorua is below its maximum level. Rotorua is barely coping to stay within its maximum, with the gates wide open, and they have been for about 4 months, I understand. So all our lakes are suffering here, so we do need to look at the effects of climate change on all our lakes. And I think we also need to look at the effects of climate change on the communities around the lakes, because it isn't just lake levels getting high, the ground out of our lakes is completely saturated. So the water just runs straight into the lakes now. So maybe we need to be looking at infrastructure around stormwater collection and stuff like that. So I'd like to see that as part of this investigation. I'd also just like to put a plea in that we, in this overall project, we do not lose sight of needing to have a look and see, and I don't know if there are or aren't, having a look to see if there are any solutions for Rotorua and Agu. So I'd just like to suggest that we have a small subgroup of that task force that looks specifically at what is possible for Rotorua and Agu, because I look at this, I think this is a year or years long study, quite likely, but we need to be going back to that community. If we're going to keep them on board with us, which they are at large at the moment, then we need to be showing them that we're looking specifically at their issues as well, not just the overall issues. So I've just put a plea in there that we do have a specific task force looking at Rotorua and
Kia ora, Phil. Thank you for that point. That was a question I was going to raise, because as it reads, this is looking at the overall impacts across the whole area. You know there's an urgent there, particularly for the communities living there. They're expecting that we have some focus on that particular issue. Kristen Stavros, do you have any comments on how we might structure things to ensure that we're dealing with immediate issues out there as well as the long-term overall effects?
I think it would be highly unprofessional for me to suggest solutions that have not been investigated yet. The fact is that Rotorua sits 20 meters above Rotorua. Rotorua sits 20 meters above Rotorua. There is no engineered approach in alleviating the level of these lakes at this point in time. And even if a decision was made here and today, it is something you need to hear leave alone, or the consenting, planning, hearing components, and so on. Fortunately, in my opinion, at the moment, that the working group has to explore these issues. I don't want to preempt decisions on that. We have to work with those communities down there to provide as much support as we can. Yesterday, we were forced to make a decision to close Panawaki Road because the water level rose to about 380 millimeters on the roads. We haven't cleverly brought, but it's highly convenient, and people with no question about this. Now, the field says the effects of these lake levels are significant. Every time we dig a hole to put the treatment system in the property at the moment, we need dewatering processes. We can't continue not to do that. So therefore, when you look into the whole system, you need to ask the question, where does the rainwater go eventually? When it flows from point A to point B? Now, I do not have a magic solution at this point in time, and would be false to claim there is a magic solution to it. It may need district planning changes, it may need planning development changes, it may need engineering infrastructure, it may need an engineered discharge points for the lakes. I don't have the answers, and that's the whole point of working partly to investigate and explore viable and cost beneficial options for that. That's what I say.
Yeah, just in summary, and agree with Stavros, this is not an easy fix. So I think we needed to form a group with a mixture of strategic thinkers and planners, as well as the solutions engineers, that sort of thing. So this would be quite a large group potential. Thanks for the response, but I don't think my question was answered. So my question was, how will we address the ultimate issue? The specific request was having a sub-working will be part of the working. The answer is yes. Okay, thank you. I think it's important, particularly for those communities, that we be able to focus there. Cheerleader.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I can only endorse Stavros's comments, and whilst you will form a working group, the worst thing we can do is give those communities false hope in terms of that there's a solution. You've got to be right, pragmatic and realistic in terms of saying what's occurring is a natural occurrence. It has occurred in the past and it will occur in the future. Sitting behind trying to address the community impact are essentially planning decisions that have been made over multiple generations, multiple decades. And if we are to learn from some of those decisions, it's maybe that future generations, future administrations should say, well, we're not going to go there. Because what we're talking about here is what they refer to as the AEP. So that's the annual exceedance probability. And both Rotorua, not so much Rotorua, Rotorua in particular, I mean, whether it's 1 in 70, whether it's 1 in 150, doesn't matter. It's naturally occurring. And my comment also refers to the other letter that we're going to deal with today, which is from the Koeki of Ngāti Pukiao. The moment that we interfere in the natural environment, whether that's building on floodplains, okay, putting infrastructure on floodplains, or putting gates at Rotorua, there will be consequences. And so when future administrations make these decisions, you've got to be aware of that. So my request is that this committee does not give communities false hope that you're going to fix this. When we're sitting here today, your ability to fix it is going to be really limited because it'll ultimately get down to the cost-benefit analysis. That's Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments?
I'm not sure I have much to add at all, but I'm happy to second the recommendations.
Jim? Thank you, Councillor Brown. We've got a mover and a seconder. Mayor Tapsell, is a question or comment?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I just want to acknowledge that there have been significant impacts on community wellbeing with this issue, and that the high lake levels will unfortunately also result in high costs of infrastructure. I have also been really concerned on the impacts of traditional and cultural land, and also for land development in future for us in economic activity like our tourism operators around the lake. So it is positive that we are collectively recognising these risks. I do support the formation of this joint approach to support our communities immediately, but also importantly plan for the future collective approaches. So sorry, I did have a quick question. And that question is, will the forecast impacts of climate change be considered within the scope of our statutory duties? And I just ask that so that we are able to ensure that we take action to minimise and prevent damage by specifically floods and erosion, because that would certainly be my expectation, as I would like to ensure that we're delivering on what we're supposed to. So I think touching on some of the comments of not giving false hope, I think I wasn't sure, it wasn't clear within the recommendations if what would come back from the working group would be within that scope that we have of our duties. So I do hope that we're able to consider a range of options that will be feasible and viable for us as councils, because I do agree with the points made this morning, but also the need to take into account the long-term horizon on what's required for significant infrastructure investment, not only to fix the assets that there are a significant amount of assets that have been damaged with these unfortunate flooding, but also meeting the future needs of good flood control systems. So just that question on, will the scope be within our statutory duties?
As officers, through you, Mr. Chair, as officers, we have an obligation to represent our governing bodies, highlight our statutory responsibilities, our discretionary duties, to identify current and future hazards and plan to mitigate them. That may involve, as I said earlier, interventions, engineering interventions, infrastructure interventions, planning interventions, and all a host of other issues. I want to point out that if we were not able to intervene and manage to mitigate natural phenomena, my opinion would still be naked and living under the canopy of forests. We have a whole range of evidence and examples where we have addressed natural phenomena through human ingenuity and appropriate interventions. This working group has to consider our statutory duties and what responsibilities we have bestowed upon us and come up with solutions that meet appropriate cost, benefit, feasibility, and viability criteria. That's what we try to do, and we will do our best to do it.
Yeah, just responding to the question, to the issue of cost and the sense of not giving false hope, raising expectations. I think the point really, ultimately, we want to try and get to the point of certainty and being able to give communities certainty so that they can make decisions. And whatever that looks like and the pathway looks like to creating certainty is the key destination in my view. Because false hope or hope is going to be languishing in the air, in the atmosphere. Certainty, once it's all been digested, is what the community and I believe what Arawa want as well, and what we want. How do we get there?
I just want to come back to another point that Councillor White raised earlier, and that was around iwi and community representation at the moment. The way the resolution reads is that the partner organisations are only will be represented on the working party. So I'm just thinking about some wording about considering the representation of iwi and community as we include into the resolution. I'll leave that with Helen to think about for a bit.
Yeah, I think it'd be up to the working group, Mr. Chairman, once it's formed, to co-opt or coerce different organisations onto it, not just the three partners around the table, and come up with terms of reference so that, and then bring it back to the partner organisations to say this is where we see what our roles and responsibilities are, be it statutory and non-statutory. So I think give the working group a bit of leeway at this stage and get all the partners on board, especially the likes of NZTA. They're going to be key to this, but it's not just, it's everybody as part of this week.
Acknowledge that point. I'd still like just a comment in there about consideration of every community and other relevant stakeholders to capture.
I'm happy to have that amended in the recommendations, that can include that if Greg's okay. Absolutely.
Helen, we've got some
So I've just taken what you said basically and said,
just changing recommendation 4 effectively, that the strategy group requests that the partner organisations form a working group of the partners, iwi, community and stakeholders, with urgency to scope assess climate change effects and so on. Yep.
Okay, the mover and seconder have been closed. Yep. Okay, I'll go to today's resolutions in totality. 1 to 5, sorry, 2 to 5. That's the amendment that's just been realised. Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Yes. In addition, we need to move just receipt of the 2 litres. So we received 1 litre from Pharmacy Coffee and also from the Knights of Care Council of Elders. Just mover and seconder happy to move those, just the receipt of those. So say mover and seconder, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to our next agenda item. So 8.2, the draft future development strategy. Then Damon's going to proceed to this.
Morning all. Is it easier if I share the presentation from my side?
Yes, it is.
Do that? Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to come and present the future or draft future development strategy for Rotorua. Effectively, just as a bit of a background, the draft strategy has been approved by the Rotorua Lakes Council, and it's and approved for consultation. So there's a public consultation period that is currently open, and it was opened on the 1st of June and it closes on the 14th of July. We also have a joint committee that's been set up between Rotorua Lakes Council and Regional Council to hear the submissions and deliberations. And we've got an independent chair that will be managing that process. That's a bit of an introduction. But just today was really to take the group through the strategy, just so that you can have a sense of what the draft strategy is. So the premise for the future development strategy is the fact that as a district we're growing. So you can see that graph on your left, there's been substantial growth over those orange bars. You can see from 2013 through to the current situation. I guess we've had a bit of a hiccup through COVID, but the projections are saying we're growing. And we've seen obviously a long period of low growth, which is those blue bars. Also, we have an aging population as well, so there's a greater demand on a wide variety of housing. So I think an important point in terms of growth is that in terms of the numbers of homes, we produced a housing and business capacity assessment last year, and the housing bottom line was effectively that we need to provide for almost 10,000 homes by 2050. We also know that we have to provide for about 9,320 jobs by 2050 as well. And the same study, that housing and business capacity assessment, also looked at the amount of land we require by 2050 to ensure that we've got a competitive business market. And we know that we're short of around 50 odd hectares of primarily light industrial land. So those are some of the indicators that said, look, we need to plan for growth going forward. So effectively that leads us to, I suppose, our required response. We're a tier 2 council, growth council, and that means that we're one of the, I suppose, key growth councils that are growing. So we effectively are required by the National Policy Statement of Urban Development to produce a future development strategy. And that's effectively our 30-year plan or strategy, if you like, to manage growth and change. And the key aspects of this strategy is to identify future locations of business and residential growth, which we can obviously align our infrastructure planning processes to. bearing in mind this is a strategy, so it gets reviewed every 3 years, so we have the ability to tweak it. It's not cast in stone. And it also, quite importantly, informs some of our shorter term planning processes like the LTP. Also, important to note that through the process of developing the strategy, we've had a number of engagement exercises, which we call pre-engagement, because obviously it's currently open for public engagement now as a draft. But in developing the draft, we've had a number of sessions with stakeholders across the community, from iwi and hapu workshops through to workshops with individual developers and consultants, and then obviously numerous technical meetings. We've got a technical advisory group set up with key government stakeholders and agencies that also provided key input into the process. Quite important to note that despite obviously they mentioned those key growth and change figures in terms of business and residential, we also obviously need to look at growth holistically and how we manage growth holistically. So we came up with a number of key outcomes that cut across, I guess, your key well-beings. So looking quite importantly at culture, choice in terms of housing choice, access in terms of ensuring that there's, where we locate growth, there's effective access to both jobs, services and education. Connection was a key factor, making sure that obviously we have a functional and viable centres network. And prosperity spoke to, I suppose, us enabling the economy through obviously locating business where it's competitive or business land where you get competitive business outcomes, and obviously environment, resilience and investment in our infrastructure in a smart manner were other components. I think important to mention, I guess, particularly to this group, is that obviously in coming up with these outcomes and obviously through this process, we did consider the Te Arawa Cultural Values Framework and also the 2050 vision. And there was particular aspirations that were identified by iwi through this process. I think fundamentally protecting the tower was key, protecting, ensuring that obviously the natural environment is protected and that growth does not obviously hamper the environment or impact negatively on it. Obviously the lakes and rivers were important as well in terms of making sure that obviously both the natural habitat is protected, but obviously water quality is protected as well. And then together with that, the landscapes. The other aspect that was mentioned was ensuring that there's flourishing mana whenua communities, supporting iwi and hapu communities to ensure that they thrive was a key aspiration. And importantly was ensuring that we have warm, dry, affordable homes, ensuring sustainable economic development and not displacing the Te Arawa people through growth was mentioned as well. Papakāinga as well came out quite strongly in terms of supporting Papakāinga and creating a more enabling environment for it, and obviously providing for the existing traditional patterns of settlement as far as possible. So what we did in terms of, before we came up with a preferred scenario, we were required to test various different scenarios, and I won't go through this in detail, but just give you a sense of what we did test. So we tested pushing growth all around Nangataia based on developer interests and suitability. And we said, what would growth look like if we pushed it all out in Nangataia? We also looked at more of a multimodal approach. I think many will be aware that we've got intensification plan change 9, that has been proposed, that's currently going through a plan change process. And we said, look, if we sort of leverage off the plan change and focus growth around our key centres, what would that look like with no greenfield land? The other scenario was looking at State Highway 36, which was more of a corridor approach to growth, and said, look, if we had to push growth all the way along State Highway 36, what would it look like? And then finally, the east side growth focus was focusing on that, focusing growth all the way along State Highway 30 leveraging off the airport and the business growth around Eastgate Business Park, and obviously growth around Linmore and Ofata. What would that look like? So looked at various different scenarios to elicit engagement and get perspectives on growth. We also went through a technical process of assessing those scenarios against key outcomes that I mentioned earlier. Obviously, those outcomes were sort of backed up by technical work. And by and large, the technical assessment showed, I guess, your more multinodal approach to intensification was the more efficient, but also more effective way in which we should be focusing growth. But I think a key factor in this was also considering the current housing issues we've got at the market and at the current housing market issues that we currently got, and also ensuring that we have affordable homes over time. So we did indicate that we need to provide sufficient greenfield land as well to offset the market uncertainties at the moment. So it's where we landed in terms of the strategy was effectively, as far as possible, a sort of a centres-based compact approach to growth, but with greenfield land on the fringes. So just to outline what the strategy ended up being, so from a residential perspective, our starting point was the medium density residential standards and Plan Change 9, which if you look at that map, it's all the mustardy yellow colour, which is our former residential one zone land, which is now medium density, so it's been upzoned. So that was a good starting point for the future development strategy in terms of providing sufficient capacity. We then also looked, and you can see what I've just brought up as those dotted brown circles, as we've looked at where would we logically consider long-term intensification, bearing in mind that this strategy looks out towards 2053. So that's saying, look, if we had to grow and continue to grow through to 2053, those are the logical locations for long-term intensification around the town centre of Nongataia, further down south from the existing proposed high-density area in Glenholm, and then around Ofata. And then also we also factored in our existing greenfield locations, which is around Whananui Rise and the Pukahangi area. And then also in the red areas, in the red circle, are the areas where we've proposed new greenfield residential development, and noting that this would be rolled out over time, and it's certainly not going to be unlocked in the short term in its entirety. In the business, in terms of business land, new commercial greenfield was identified in that these areas here, the purple and the blue. And obviously, quite importantly, is that I suppose the notion for identifying those business land where they are was to also incentivize the relocation of industrial activity in areas that currently, obviously, where it's not suited. So, for instance, we've done that to try and incentivize the movement of the awkwardly located sort of industrial / business car yards in Nongataia to more suitable locations, like where the nexus of State Highway 36 and State Highway 5 is. You can see at that top purple circle. And then also ensuring that, I suppose, we enable tourism, commercial / tourism activity along State Highway 5 where it's already happening. And then if we move out east where the airport is, looking at potentially enabling business land proximate to both the airport and Eastgate Business Park. A lot of businesses obviously indicated that being on that route, that key freight route on State Highway 30 through to the port was critical for them in terms of future development. Very briefly, I'm not going to go into this in detail, is that I suppose our approach to rolling out development is, as far as possible, keeping a compact urban outcome. So that grey area shows you our existing urban footprint, and the yellow locations show our future residential areas that have been identified, and you can see that they're adjacent to the grey areas, which is our existing urban footprint. So we're trying to keep it as compact as possible. And this also relies us on us ensuring that we have a centres-based approach, so that that big purple dot in the middle, which is a city centre, indicates that the city centre plays a key retail and office function, and that's where we'd obviously want to ensure that that still takes place. And then our major centres, which is Nongatahi and Owhata, are those centres that would support growth around Nongatahi and Owhata, and they become quite important centres to pick up secondary functions. And then we've got our more tertiary centres that are the purple ones, that would obviously also play an important role in terms of ensuring that we function well from a residential perspective. And then lastly, key corridors were also identified that support high density residential development. Fenton Street and Tatanaka Street play an important role in terms of supporting mixed use development, and that's both commercial in the case of Tatanaka Street to commercial and residential over time, and Fenton Street tourism and residential. And then in terms of our approach to businesses, I've mentioned obviously the network of centres play an important tertiary role, but also a key thing would be incentivizing the relocation of business over industrial type activities over time that are in locations that are not currently suited, as I mentioned earlier. So in terms of Napuna, Ferry Springs and Nongatahi, it's important that, I suppose, providing that alternative land for business and industrial incentivizes business away from those locations. I mentioned the State Highway 30 being key to freight, which is that purple light big arrow and line. And also the yellow hashed areas are the areas which are our tourism gateway areas. So ensuring that obviously we enable the types of activities up north near Nongatahi along State Highway 5 that would support commercial/tourism type activities, and then obviously ensuring the quality and amenity on Fenton Street obviously provides that tourism gateway down south. Just in terms of another component of the future development strategy is ensuring that we've got sufficient capacity to meet demand over time. I mentioned earlier that we got to provide for 9,750 homes, but obviously in doing this exercise, we've got current housing issues that we're going to meet over the short and medium term. So we felt we needed to put more capacity on the table. So we're planning for 12,300 homes, and I'll touch on the phasing a bit later, but effectively what that looks like is that we anticipate 7,000 odd homes being taken up by the existing brownfield areas, which was that grey area I mentioned, our existing urban footprint. We're also anticipating that our existing greenfield provides about 1,700 of the homes, about 14%, and that the new greenfield areas provide 3,600 homes. What that looks like in terms of the spread across the district is outlined here. And I think a key component in terms of explaining this is also that this will be implemented and phased over time. So we wouldn't be delivering obviously all of those 12,300 homes in the short to medium term. It's really spread out over the short, medium and long term. And when I talk about terms, short term is around 3 years, medium term 10 years, and long term from 10 to 30 years. So just in terms of the phased implementation, as I mentioned, that grey area picks up the MDRS and Plan Change 9. So in the short term, we're looking just really at these locations that I've identified in those black circles there, around Nongatahi, so the Heritage Farm area, etc., just on the fringe adjacent to State Highway 5, and then Owhata Lakefront. But coupled with that would be over time, obviously providing for more intensification. So a key thing that we would be doing is monitoring the uptake of intensification through the plan change. And then we have the ability on a 3-year cycle to pull back on those growth areas if we're seeing sufficient uptake of intensification. And then in terms of the longer term residential, those are the red circles in the picture. and that's really around Dalbeth and Leonard Road, and also beyond the current Wharanui rise through to G Road as the longer term residential greenfield locations. And then lastly, in terms of business, the short term is really those locations in the black circles there, nexus of State Highway 5 and 36, and then also just south of Eastgate Business Park and adjacent to the airport. And the longer term are those locations that I've identified in the red circles there. So really, effectively, how will this be implemented? It will be through priority area development plans, and we obviously unpack that in more detail as we start implementing. But effectively, what that looks like, I won't be going into detail today, as we've developed some draft plans with indicative locations for key elements within those plans as part of the FDS. But the key thing going forward will be actually implementing those. So that would be, those 4 development areas are really Nongatara, West Side, Central and East Side, and that effectively covers our urban area. Just to sum up, I suppose the key documents that if one wants to dive into the FDS and get more information on it is really around, we've got a fact sheet and a website set up, and it's important to go there first to have a look at information. So there's a 2-page fact sheet that really just gives you the high level essence of the FDS, and then we've got a consultation document which is around 20 pages, which is a light read, I guess, and it's got the key elements of the FDS in there. And then there's the main FDS document, if you really want to get into the actual FDS itself. Obviously, a lot more detailed maps in there as well. And then finally, there's a technical document that tells us how we've sort of constructed the FDS, but also has key attachments such as the market economic assessment and the vehicle kilometre travel and carbon emissions assessment that was done to support the FDS as well. So just in terms of our process going forward, as I mentioned, engagement has started on the 1st of June. We have 5 public drop-in sessions. We've already had 2 of those sessions. And then the public engagement ends on the 14th of July. We then have hearings and deliberations over the 28th of August to the 1st of September. And finally, we adopt the FDS in October, hopefully everything going well. So, yeah, that's effectively it.
Thank you very much, Damon. Very comprehensive presentation. I'll first ask for a mover and a seconder, then I'll open up for any questions. Move, Beniti, second, Councillor Brown. Are there any questions? Councillor Wood.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I have been privileged to this presentation before, but in the context of the Arawa Lake Strategy Group itself, what are the key components of this particular presentation that might impact upon the lakes? What are the critical interfaces in that particular space? Obviously, the obvious one is increasing infrastructure needs and so forth and so on, but specifically, what are some of the aspects? Sure.
I'll put that question first to Damon, but I'm conscious that Te Arawa Lake Staff Trust staff and also perhaps council staff as well. So Damon, can you just talk to that please, where the particular, well, our interest is the impacts of this development into the future from an environmental and lakes water quality perspective?
Yes, I mean, effectively what we did was I suppose a stage process is that we did a basic sieve analysis process. We looked at all the constraints from a no-go and a go carefully perspective. So obviously anything that would have impact that we felt was a no-go was eliminated immediately in terms of development. And that really was looking at all the key data layers, both provided from regional council and our own council, in terms of both natural hazards, but also in terms of what we wanted to protect, such as significant natural areas, etc. We also then, at the next level, we had working groups that went through that multi-criteria analysis and looked at each parcel of land and the potential of that land to impact both positively and negatively in terms of development. So through that sieve exercise, I suppose we feel we've addressed and we've identified locations that are suitable, bearing in mind that this then gets refined further, I suppose, at the next layer of planning when you do structure planning. So it doesn't give developers necessarily a green light to just go ahead. It then gets refined further. So that sort of just gives you a sort of a context, I guess, in terms of how we've addressed it at the future development strategy level.
Thank you, Damon. Do you have any additional comments from Lakes Trust staff, Regional Council?
I think the first one to make in terms of the effects on the lake is firstly, Arawa Lakes Trust has undergone a process, not quite completely finished yet, but it's in relation to the stormwater management, and the first initial meetings with Upper New in relation to that particular topic was they didn't want the consenting process to continue until such time legislation that has been in review is determined, and then they would be in a better position to state how we deal with this particular matter. The second issue that I think that from the Arawa Lakes Trust perspective, and this has been communicated that to our community tie-up and government's board, is that we believe that the engagement process with Upper New is not good enough. We put a timeline on there from June to October, and we're not too sure what exactly the UE is saying in relation to these areas that have been proposed as development or intensification areas. So we would like to see that. We did offer in meetings earlier on that we could assist with that engagement process to have sort of a full informed process that included Hapuranimi in that process. And the last thing that from Tom's perspective is we haven't had the opportunity to hold the pen in this process. So what has been proposed here is good information. I would like to be involved directly in the drafting.
Any further questions or comments? We're already got the members. Yes. Okay, we've got. Can you remind me of the members again? Sorry. I can see you and Councillor Brown. Okay, so we've got our mover and seconder. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Damon. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.3. So an introduction of the Tarawera Collective Impact Project team. I understand this is going to be presented by Toby Hanna. I also see Harden is in the room, so I'll welcome you up too, please, Harden. And if there's anyone else,
Tēnā koutou, just before they jump in with their presentation, I'd just like to acknowledge it's been a long time coming to get this team here. I'm sure you've all heard about the project for a while, so really pleased to be welcoming them here today. I'd also like to acknowledge Alva Conroy, who has been spearheading this project for a long time. Unfortunately, she's left the project and the team, so on to some mahi with council, so just acknowledging her work as well.
Tēnā koutou me te tabara, tēnā tātou katoa. Koe ko tanukana hangi o reuti hoki mua, huri no Tarawa Whānui, Tiharangi, Matsukawi, Matsukeo, no Taringa Moana no hoki. Koe te kaupuna no Taio, tēnei hoku, so this is the introduction to our work. Some of my other teams also here as well. So I'll introduce themselves.
Tēnā tātou, koe au, kona kauhan tōku iwa, he uri ahau no Tūharangi, Ngā Te Pēkea, me Ngāi Tūpoe. I'm whakapātaia, so the communication support for this project.
Tēnā tātou i te whānau, Tēnā hoki tātou I te uihuinga nei, mihi au ki a rangi ui rau kokopatsu anu, ku me ngā ngata nei whakapai ai tēnei whare, ka mihi hoki ki tangata koa I mea I whakarite te handi. Ko harina nei rina haru tāpera tōku ingoa, e maha o ku hononga ki roto te Arawa whānui, te motu whānui hoki, engari ahi tahu au I roto o ngā tirangiti, tarawera tōku maunga, tarawera tōku roto o te awa o te atuataku. Awa ka rere ki te wana nui a toi ko tōku arai ki roto watata, o rangi aohi a tōku whare, ko rākau e ke tara tōku whare kai, nā reira tēnā tātou katoa umihi ana. My name's Harina Lina Harupāpera. I'm one of the community connectors, but probably te paupono tai ao o Tarawera. And yeah, I'm very pleased and actually tino koa to have this role, to be able to serve my place and my pepeha, my whānau. So it's actually a kind of a dream role. And yeah.
So we've got a brief presentation just to introduce the project in our group. Like I said, to see Alva was a super integral part of bringing us all group together. Alva was a really integral part of bringing us all group together. Obviously, the aspirations and dream of this particular project centres around Lake Tarawera. Long-term collective proactive action for the health and well-being of Lake Tarawera and the lakes that surround it as well. Obviously, our team was very newly formed. February, Harina and I were lucky enough to be given this opportunity, and obviously our team have joined us on the last few weeks. Nicole and our data managers, who unfortunately can't be here today. Obviously, part of our mahi is to connect, provide support, and just find opportunities for any groups that surround Tarawera, Māori land blocks, community groups and organisations to try and bring a collective approach to the well-being of our roto. Some of our project outcomes that were formed prior to us coming into the Rotorua with our collaborative thinking is to connect and collect information with all of our Rotorua groups that surround the catchment, trying to find things that bring our why together, why the Waitara is important to all the Rotorua that surround this particular area, helping build capacity and capability, especially for our whenua partners. We're very lucky enough to have our office space within the Tuharangi Tribal Authority offices, so it's very special for us to have a place within that particular unit, working with our whānau Ngāti Tarāwha as well in our engagements, and we also having a coordinated approach to this project, which is things that we're still working on and looking to move forward. Our project team, obviously those of us who are here today, myself, Harina, are our community connectors, Nicole is our communication support, our Ruha whānau, Corey and Gilly, unfortunately unable to be here today due to the passing of their kuia, so our thoughts go out to them today, and also our whanaunga Chanel, who's our business support. Just for us, some of the focuses for us just for this particular year, we're still in the process of connecting with all of the various groups. As you might have noticed, the catchment itself is quite a large catchment, so we're still in the process of those engagements. Also trying to identify the gaps in information and data that these particular groups have or might have, and then trying to facilitate shared agendas between all these different groups. We understand that while they all might have different thoughts I feel like specifically for myself and Harina, the why for each of these groups, like why it is so important, can be brought together in some way, shape or form. and then very much so trying to help out iwi members and farming members with their own capacity and capability around how fish water management. So those are some of our big goals for this year so far. So yeah, that is basically our project in a nutshell. Once again, thank you so much for letting us present here today. Tino paku, but very grateful. So ngā mihi.
Any part-time, any questions?
More comment, Diana, got a whakao, and I congratulate you for this wonderful sort of thoughts around collective cooperation. You know, you talk about the iwi, the land entities, the communities, and that is ideal. And, you know, kapai arina, you're missing that particular space. Look forward to that happening. I'm sure the members and the communities of Tarawera will be happy with this particular approach. It's not excluding anybody, it's including everybody, because they all have an intent for the well-being of Tarawera. And that's going to take a collective effort. So well done, and wish you all the best in that space. And also, just wanted to add talk to Alva and the participation. She's highly regarded, having won a national award for planning. So you've been able to benefit from all of that expertise and long way from you. So,
Councillor White, I just also want to support this me to Alva, which she's done, particularly this project, but also which she's done plenty. And also just want to me to the team. It's really awesome to see younger generations in the space too, because we know that a lot of the solutions required in the space are intergenerational. So come here, I can keep on that. Any other questions or comments?
Chair, are we able to ask the freshwater improvement funding what period of time is it over? This is not May.
You know the answer to that in terms of the project funding for this developments?
It was 2 years. 2 years.
Okay, can I have a mover and second, please? Councillor White, please. Second, Councillor Brown. All those in favour, say aye. Yep. Winters and Brown. Yep. Cool. All those in favour, say aye. Against, carries. But I better not. We'll have a break, so we've got a break until it'll be 11 o'clock.
Mr. Chair, just wonder if I can quickly have my presentation around the
review.
Just quickly.
Okay, yes, we'll do that. So you can get away. Sorry, members.
So my presentation today was really to introduce Lana Africa, but she's just late last night tabled her apologies for this week. Something else has popped up. Lana Africa has been appointed, and it was as of Wednesday. Contract was agreed on to conduct an independent review. Lana Africa has been involved in Te Arawa Lakes Trust since the Te Arawa Trust Board and has extensive knowledge in the area of the organisation and where it comes from. And she's agreed to conduct that review. The time frame that was communicated initially when she was approached was to have that completed by December, but she wants it to be acknowledged that formalisation process of her appointment is 2 months down the track, so she's asking for an extra 2 months, so probably earlier next year. I think it's my role to source together all the information that she needs to successfully go through that process. And I've had this discussion with Helen yesterday, and she's hoping to kick into the work, into that review ASAP.
Thank you for the update. I'm going to take any questions.
So, sorry, Chair, just a question with the recent discovery of the Golden Plan is someone in terms of Tolt getting some oversight in terms of where that project's sit at the moment.
Yep, so we can talk to that, okay?
Okay.
So we did have a meeting last week with Biosecurity Regional Council, so we're in the stages of implementing an incursion response plan with them. Unfortunately, we had a missed opportunity. The communications from NPI hasn't been ideal with us, so we will be having a meeting next week with our governments in John Walsh and NPI to talk about the steps going forward. So that's where we are currently at in terms of response to the plan. We also have already had our team, our biosecurity team, join regional council team doing surveillance around the so far.
Thanks for providing that response, Sweta. I'll take questions regarding the strategy group review process. Councillor White.
I was going to ask about the Golden Plan. Sorry. And whether the MFE members on the screen, are they involved, the MFE involved in this particular conversation?
No, we're not, but we were just noting it because what we might do is follow up with our MPI biosecurity people, just see if we can get an update through them.
Okay, if there aren't any questions on the strategy group review process, I'll call for a move and a second to receive the update. Councillor Brown, Councillor White. No one else wants to share the role today. Done for the team, cover. Thank you. Okay, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Hamana. Okay, we're going to take a break for 15. We'll reconvene at 11:05. Kia ora tātou. Okay, get back onto our agenda. So the next agenda item is 8.4, progress on the Lake Rotorua incentive scheme. And we've got a presentation from Rosemary. Kia ora, Rosemary.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Rosemary Cross tōko ingoa. I'm Senior Project Manager with Regional Toi Pāpana, and today I'd just like to give you an update on how we're progressing with the Lake Rotorua Incentive Scheme. So just by way of background, the Lake Rotorua Incentive Scheme forms part of the integrated framework for the restoration of water quality in Lake Rotorua. The scheme recognises that it's a key part of the cost sharing between the community and landowners in the Lake Rotorua catchment, and Waipiri Regional Council and the Crown have equally contributed towards a $40 million incentives fund. The scheme's tasked with removal of 100 tonnes of nitrogen per year from the lake, and nitrogen is purchased when landowners voluntarily reduce the nitrogen leaching to what is required to make nutrient goods. So the scheme will pay up to $400 a tonne, that's $400 a kilo of nitrogen, and that's measured at the lake. And the nitrogen is secured through a 999-year encumbrance on land titles. Originally, the scheme was scheduled to finish in 2022 when nitrogen trading became an option for landowners, but however, given the slow uptake to date, the scheme has been extended until at least 2027. So progress to date. So to date, we have 31 incentives agreements secured, and this graph just shows progress year by year. So in the first couple of years of the operation of the scheme, we went really well, and we secured 19 tonnes of nitrogen. A lot of these initial deals were landowners who were actively considering land use change prior to the introduction of the incentive scheme. And after that, after 2018, as you can see from the graph, the progress of the incentive scheme fell off quite rapidly. Some of the reasons for this was that there was a lot of uncertainty around the Lake Rotorua nutrient rules, and landowners were holding off just to see what was going to happen. And in some cases, they were also waiting for the introduction of nitrogen trading in 2022. 2021-22, the deal started to increase again, and it was due to a number of factors, including the finalisation of the rules, the willingness of the incentive scheme to purchase smaller amounts of nitrogen than what was originally anticipated, and also an increase in the price of carbon, which made it quite attractive for landowners to convert pastoral land into trees. So this graph shows the cumulative progress of the scheme in terms of nitrogen secured over time. So 31 deals to date have removed 35 tonnes of nitrogen. The nitrogen has been purchased at an average price of 386 kilograms of in-lake nitrogen. And this price is based on the type of land use change. So, for instance, if a dairy farm wants to convert completely to trees, then that is of a higher value than a dry stock farm converting to trees, or a dairy farm converting to dry stock. And that's in terms of the effort that has to monitoring those agreements going forward. So obviously, if it's a full conversion to trees, we don't have to monitor stock coming on off the property. You go out once every few years, the trees are there, there's no stock within the tree area. That is a lot less monitoring burden for the regional council. So progress by sector. From the dairy sector, we've secured 13 agreements and 25 tonnes of nitrogen. 6 dairy farms have been permanently retired, and that accounts for 19 tonnes of nitrogen, which is an average of about 3 tonnes per dairy farm. The remaining 6 tonnes is from areas that were previously benchmarked as dairy that have converted to lower land use, lower leaching land use, such as trees or subdivision. So progress in the dry stock sector, we've secured 18 agreements and 10 tonnes of nitrogen, and obviously there's less nitrogen allocated to dry stock, which is a lower number there. I'd just like to pause here and just acknowledge the contribution from Māori landowners towards the incentive scheme. So 25% of the rural land in the Lake Rotorua catchment is owned by Māori landowners. Of that land, there's been 11 incentives agreements broken, which is 35% of all agreements, and approximately 20 tonnes of nitrogen per year, or 57% of the target to date. It's been removed, and this represents 958 hectares of land use change. So I would profit that Māori landowners are punching with their weight when it comes to the incentive scheme. I'd just also like to touch on carbon trading, which has become a bit of a game changer for the incentive scheme. So the price of carbon has increased over the last couple of years, from $36 a tonne in October 2020 to $54 a tonne present. So it peaked at $88.50 a tonne in October 2022, and the fall in the price that we're seeing at the moment is due to uncertainty around government policy, and the feeling within the forestry industry is that although the price of carbon is going to remain volatile over time once there's more certainty around that policy, it is likely to pick up again. The reason why this is important for the incentive scheme is the $400 a tonne maximum that the scheme can pay, $400 a kilo maximum that the scheme can pay, it is not enough to offset the losses from, in a lot of cases, from pastoral farmers. So farmers need to look at other options to enhance their income once they do large-scale land use change. And one of the options is to plant trees. And we're not just talking pine trees, although pine trees do burn carbon more quickly than beeches. They're also cheaper to put in the ground. So the other option for landowners doing large-scale land use change is subdivision, and I'll come to that a little bit later on. So in terms of the pipeline going forward, we've got 4 agreements currently being finalised, which will add another 2.6 tonnes a year to the incentives target. And I'd like to say that potential deals do continue to enter the pipeline quite often, usually out of nowhere. It's not necessarily a landowner that we're going to focus on, often a landowner who's been thinking about this for quite some time, and circumstances change and then they're ready to proceed. We've done some analysis of how much nitrogen currently that's allocated out to the landowners that is currently not being utilised. And there's only about 7 tonnes of nitrogen in the catchment, the whole catchment, that's currently not being used by landowners. And it's spread across multiple landowners, so there's no one landowner we could go to and say, hey, you've got two tonnes of nitrogen, we want to buy off you. It's spread all over the catchment. The highest allocations, unsurprisingly, are in the Waititi, Arawa, and Arawa catchments. This is where a lot of the dairy happens around the catchment. And these landowners are tending to hold on to their nitrogen. And what that is telling us is that further large-scale land use change will be required in order for us to be able to retain. So what would be the potential barriers to progress? So one is nitrogen trading, which came into effect on 1st of July 2022, and that allows landowners to broker private agreements, landowner to landowner agreements, to trade nitrogen. Someone's got some excess nitrogen, they can trade it or sell it to another landowner who is struggling to meet the nitrogen discharge allocation. Our regional council doesn't actively enter into that space, and to our knowledge, there has been no nitrogen trading taking place to date. A consent is required both from the landowner who is offering the nitrogen and the landowner who is relinquishing the nitrogen. They need to update their nitrogen management plans, and it's quite an expensive process and not one we actively support while we're still trying to get the incentives to go. 999-year encumbrance is also a potential barrier. There's been a couple of deals that come to mind that we've got a certain way down the negotiation process. We've generated the legal documentation, and they just say what you're offering me is not enough for me to have a 999 encumbrance on my titles. As I've mentioned, price is also a barrier in that it won't support large-scale land use change on the whole for landowners, particularly those ones that are highly leveraged. They've got big mortgages, they're tied to banks that does not want to produce a certain amount of milk solids, and they just say, I can't do it. And one that's really come out of left field for us is the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land, which came into effect last year, I think it was November last year, which effectively stops subdivision happening on rural land, that sort of land use capability class 1 to 3. So I just generated this map to see how much class land 1, 2 or 3 we have in the catchment. So we don't have any class 1 land in the catchment, no surprises there. But we do have 456 hectares of class 2 and 3 in the catchment. And that's shown by pink areas on the map. The problem with land use capability mapping is that it's done at a very, very broad scale. And even if you have class 2 or 3 land, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's suitable for high value cropping or food growing or other sorts of food growing. So just by way of example, around east side, which in the previous presentation has been slated for high density housing, that's really wet land out there. It has serious limitations, but it's classified as, I think it's class 2 land, and it slopes obviously on a high value. The other thing that you note from this map is that a lot of the class 2 and 3 land is out on the western side of the lake in the catchments that have the most nitrogen, which is where we want landowners to subdivide and sell us their nitrogen. So, the NPS HPL is actually not helpful for our incentive scheme, and we've currently got a landowner who's already sold nitrogen to the scheme prior to the NPS coming in, and now he's having to go through the process of applying for an exemption under regulation. So there is an exemption available for water quality gains, but anecdotal evidence suggests that it's very, very rare that an exemption is given. So I just wanted to highlight that as an emerging issue for reaching the incentives target. And I guess maybe it's something we need to talk to Rotorua Lakes Council planning staff about, and see if we can come to some sort of agreement about how this exemption is going to be used in this catchment. So I guess in a nutshell, of our 100 tonne target, we've got 50 tonnes in line of sight, we believe. So we think that over the next couple of years, we can get to 50 tonnes. However, the other 50 tonnes, it's not immediately clear where we're going to get that from unless circumstances change somehow and landowners with high nitrogen discharge applications are going to be prepared to fund some of their applications. So possible next steps. So we think, possibly extending the scheme timeframe out to at least 2032. We could consider increasing the price paid per kilogram of nitrogen to make it more palatable to landowners. We could acquire multiple dairy farms rather than just one or two. We're looking at a dairy farm only having about 3 tonnes of nitrogen to get up. Might be up to 10 dairy farms, and how palatable that is, we don't know. We could consider further regulation to achieve the target, or it could be a combination of all of the above. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rosemary. Questions, Councillor Lawton?
Rosemary, the 31 deals that we've done and dusted, we annually monitor them, and are they all doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of what they said they were going to do as part of the agreement?
Yes. So we're confident. So they're monitored as part of their plan change team monitoring. So they have to provide us with a set of scenarios. And like I said, when it comes to those that have trees in it, that's obviously the monitoring process. So absolutely.
I've got a related question to that. I recall as this was being developed and other policy settings around the country overseas, it was being questioned about its validity. So I'm just wondering whether there's any updates in terms of, I know it's been adopted as a key tool. Does it appear to be reflecting what actual results are seeing?
So preliminary data suggests that it is quite suitable for use in the Lake Rotorua catchment as a regulatory tool. Perhaps not so much in catchments like Canterbury, regions like Canterbury, but I think it's almost approached this space. We haven't received any final report on this at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just a sort of a comment, sort of a question, and I know the scheme started with a bit of a hiss and a roar, which was made us all feel very optimistic about the incentive scheme. However, it is really slowed down, and I'm going to be honest and say languished over the last several years. And it did say that you can see a way to 50 tonnes. My question is, how are we going to get to that 100 tonnes? Is it actually realistic? Or it seems to me we have to come up with a whole new plan to get that next 50 tonnes. So are you looking at ways to do that? Because otherwise I think the scheme isn't going to achieve its goal.
So I guess that's part of what this update is about, is that we're looking for the guidance on this group as to how do we move forward with this? Bearing in mind it is a voluntary scheme and we can't go out and force people. Although we do have ways of funding, we won't support those application for subdivision unless the landowner sells us in excess nitrogen not required for the subdivision. So that's one tool that we use. Because otherwise that nitrogen remains free, the catchment can be traded or sold, and there's no net benefit to the lake from the subdivision. But yeah, so I guess what we're looking for is some guidance as to should we just continue on, just trying to persuade landowners, or open to suggestions as to what will be the next steps.
Next Rosemary, I'll take Councillor Brown and then Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you, Rosemary, for your report. I'm a little bit confused because, as Chairman Lee has pointed out in previous meetings, I'm prone to that. The barriers to progress, which you just alluded to, are real, and I understand those, and we need to resolve those. I get that. But you're also saying that staff are confident that 50 tonnes will be achieved prior to 2032. How do you resolve that? Ultimately, when will we get to at least the 50 tonnes?
I guess that's based on local knowledge, and it's around landowners who we know have high nitrogen discharge applications and perhaps don't have a business continuity plan. So we believe that at some stage to contract, some of those landowners will want to come and speak to us about selling nitrogen. Another possibility is that Aboriginal Council is potentially looking at a regional park. So taking over to the long-term planning process on the regional park for the lake Rotorua catchment. So if that comes to fruition, then obviously we can use that to convert dairyland into a regional park. So at this stage, I don't have any defined timeframes, but based on our knowledge of where nitrogen is in the catchment and who that nitrogen is allocated to, we do believe we can get to 50 tonnes.
Rosemary, Councillor White, then Mayor Timson.
Kia ora, Rosemary. I do have some memory of this. But still, the first 2 to 3 years I was obviously on the ground directing the incentive program. I can recall copious amounts of coffee, tea had with farmers in this particular space, carrying on talking to them. And one of the things that I found was certainty had value. Because there's a cloud of uncertainty in the air around environmental challenges, and of course the decline in the value of the land as well, and the way the banks were looking at them. Went from something like $30,000 a hectare to somewhere around 20,000, and a lot of the dairy farms that we did to came in loaded with debt, and then suddenly this changed and switched. And so they were causing that, but I think certainty was a big issue for them. And the first one that got across the line was a dairy farmer, a non-mining dairy farmer. And that took a lot of, but even after the fact, that dairy farmer would ring up, even now, and says that, we're going really well. That certainty was a really big thing for us. And so it comes down to that point where they make a decision, and where they're actually not coerced into it, but they're warmed to the situation. So how does it operate at the moment? Because we had a board then, obviously, and that board was disestablished, and I was working to the board. How's it working at the moment? What's the mechanism?
So the way we manage this at the moment is that the land management officer, so landowners are given a dedicated land management officer who gets to know the landowner, who gets to know the circumstances and how much nitrogen they've got, and introduces them to the idea of the incentive scheme. And then if the landowner wants to, it's like then they come to me and I start talking and building that relationship with the landowner and getting through the process. So.
I noticed that, that the Māori landowners are coming to the party on this, and that we meet in the 999 year encumbrance wasn't an issue. I think likewise when I was doing it, the view was, well, we're everywhere. We're supportive of the environmental traction that we're going on. We can get a bit of money in the picture for us to do this, and so we're moving on. It's not such the case, I think, for a lot of other landowners who are there in the shorter term, not forever. So that's always going to be a challenge. And so, but look, I do believe you can make 50 times. You really do. I mean, I think the way society is pointing, environmental issues are pointing there. If you can create that certainty for them and actually can work and, the fund managers or the management group that we're talking about, they can go and have the conversations. It really is having an unbiased conversation and actually working them towards a decision that's unbiased and actually can make their own decision around their certainty in their future. And I wonder sometimes whether that sort of conversation happens. I'm assuming it does, but when you are a land management person, you can sometimes get involved in the discussions around the technical issues around land management, as opposed to the more gratuitous way of looking at the future. So anyway, I'll just leave it there. I believe you can do it. You'll get the 50 tonnes, so all the best. I noticed that it's extended another 5 years, was it?
Yes.
Because it was 2022 the target originally, right? Okay, all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you. And just going on from Councillor White's comments, I do want to acknowledge the significant amount of work that has been made, but I also want to acknowledge the uncertainty for our agriculture sector and the fact that they are the sustainable in the world often, but of course for environmental outcomes more needs to be done. So my question is just around where do we get the confidence from? Because the report highlights that the current process won't produce the target outcomes, at best case scenario only 50 tonnes by 2032. So my question is really based on that statement in the report that staff are confident that sufficient funds are available. And also I saw in the presentation just then that 50 tonnes are in line of sight. So what makes staff confident, and is there a plan as to where that additional 50 tonnes might come from? Because that is a significant amount, and what was required within that needed that $10 million to achieve. And because it's been requested that the Minister's letter is tabled, I also want to note that within the Minister's letter, his reason for not fulfilling the commitments of the $10 million funding from memory was due to a drawn out process. Now, all of the issues that are highlighted in this report also clearly indicate that there is no urgency in need for these funds, but obviously the consequences of the Minister's decision will be severely felt by the Rotorua community, especially the community that we as Rotorua Lakes Council need to rate, and especially in the Ngāti Piki-Aorohe. So just to summarise, my question is, how are staff confident, and what was the urgency of needing funding within the next financial year for these land incentive schemes when they're not delivering on targets and that timeframe has had to be extended?
So I can answer your first question, Councillor, as to why are staff confident that we can get to 50 tonnes. So as I previously mentioned, we have quite an intimate knowledge of landowners in our catchment. We know how much nitrogen has been allocated to particular landowners, and we also know, a reasonable amount of knowledge about their personal circumstances. So when the time is right, we approach those landowners and speak to them about selling to incentives, and we are pretty confident that we'll make a lot of progress in that area. We also know from experience that things change for landowners, and they might, a landowner that we haven't had in line of sight will sell, come to us and say, we want to sell the nitrogen, we want to subdivide. So that's why we feel confident we can get to 50 tonnes. In terms of the urgency and the minister's letter. Can I ask them perhaps to address that?
I think the urgency around the funding being available for the incentive scheme, I don't know that was, we've never, we staff have always said that we need the funding to be available for the incentive scheme to move when opportunities arise. So I think that's a key point. We're asking for your feedback on how we can get this next 50 tonne, and we'll obviously need funding to take advantage of those opportunities. In terms of the repayment of the incentive scheme funding, had it been attributed to Rotorua, I think the issue there was around the commitments made at Strategy Group around the repayment of that, rather than the timing of the incentive scheme being the issue. It was around the commitments made at Strategy Group. That's my understanding.
Any further questions or comments, Chair Leader?
Thanks, Chair. Look, this issue is complex, but as Rosemary said, you've got to distill it down to the real simple facts. Simple facts are, one, you get 100 tonne out of the lake. Whether or not you get it by 2032, 27, you can make as much as you like. In the event you don't get it, there's two consequences. One, you get more money to pay to buy more. Two, you go back to the original plan change 10 discussions we had with the rights of the primary collective, and everybody, probably on a pro rata basis, takes a further haircut. It's as simple as that. If the science is still defending the 100 tonne, this is the only options you've got.
If there's no further questions,
Maybe if Rosemary could just say, is that right?
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you.
with that summary of facts, I might call for a mover and a seconder, please.
Sorry, if I can just reiterate my point. I don't question the science on it, and I do agree with your points, Chief Leader. What my concern is just ensuring that we do have a plan to deliver. We are very committed, of course, to improving lakes water quality. We do see, and I certainly see the benefits on this. Just what is of serious concern to me is that within the report, I'm not seeing that it's being delivered. So I would just be concerned if we did need to extend that timeframe, or we did need to commit further above and beyond financial support towards this scheme without understanding what that plan is or if it is feasible or viable. But I do also want to note that, of course, Chatham Lakes Trust will be undertaking a review, and I'm sure that within that we will be able to find and look at the land incentive scheme and whether there's any improvements that we collectively agree on in terms of delivering that as well.
Could I just add, Chair, Ben Tapsell made a good point that the Chatham Lakes Trust is starting a review on this. You really need to be really well informed by some really skilled people, because one of the issues that Rosemary raised here is if you look at the carbon price and see what the carbon price has done, because the higher the carbon price goes, the better the incentive is in terms of trading. So you say, why has the carbon price gone down? The carbon price has essentially gone down because the Crown, the government of the day, is really concerned about green inflation. The higher the carbon price grows, the greater the drivers for that inflationary aspect. So I don't have the answers, but I think when you do your review as the Chatham Lakes Trust in terms of reference, these are some of the things that you need to feed into consideration. Do I see that turning around in the short term, short to medium term? I don't. And recent discussions regarding the status of plantation forestry just complicates it even more.
I'll call for a mover and seconder, please. Happy to move, Mr. Chair, Councillor Winters. Okay, to the old faithful, Councillor Brown. Okay, all those in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you for your presentation, Rosemary. Okay, moving on to verbal update from the Ministry of Environment. So, Lorena, it's you, Mark.
Tēnā koutou. First, I just would like to introduce Mark Witihira, who's a manager within our Treaty Partnerships team, who will be coming in to support yourselves and the strategy group going forward, as Jacinta will be moving into other initiatives. I'll be working with Mark to ensure that there is the continuity between us. So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Nā mihi kia koutou katoa, ki uri o hau ki te nai te waki nā pui o hau. Ko mā Witihira tuku ingoa, and so araha mai for not, plane wasn't able to land twice last night, so we had to turn around, but would have loved to have been there to meet you face to face. Kia ora.
But in saying that, there'll be plenty of opportunities to do that. I just want to probably raise four key things. First of all, you may be aware that the freshwater farm plans regulations has been made public. And from that, what that means is that we're going to be looking at commencing parts of that initially within the Waikato and Southern regions from 1st of August. The Bay of Plenty region is scheduled to commence either late 2024 or early 2025. And I just want to thank, on behalf of the team, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, who've been heavily involved in supporting that program to date. But of course, having supported that, are in a good position to start having conversations. While we're looking at starting that program of work for your region in later 2024, early 2025, there's actually nothing stopping regions from progressing that further, and we would definitely encourage it. What it will mean for farmers is that they'll need to conduct a non-farm freshwater assessment and identify actions that will mitigate those risks. And some of those risks will be tailored based on farm activities, the landscape, and the local catchment area. There is, of course, the need that these freshwater farm plans will need to be certified and audited and reported back to the regional council. I mentioned that because some of the conversations that you've been talking about does actually support what you're trying to do with the incentive scheme as well. The other part I wanted to raise with you is the New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme and the redesigned New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme permanent forestry category is a document. Both those documents are out for submissions at the moment. They were put out on the 19th of June and close on the 11th of August. And just given the conversation that you've been raising in the incentive scheme, I would encourage yourselves to review those. There might be opportunities to talk about a number of things that it raises, particularly around the incentivisation of activities that are undertaken around ETS, but also recognition of native forest and wetlands as part of that regime. The third element I wanted to raise with you, of course, that information is all on, both those parts are available on our website, and I can certainly share those links with the Secretariat. The third part is around the resource management reforms, the Natural and Built Environment Bill and the Spatial Planning Bill. We are awaiting Select Committee report back to the House, due hopefully next week. From that process, it will go through the usual parliamentary process, and we're hoping to have that legislation passed before this current government term is finished. There is another third part of the reforms, which is the Climate Change Adaptation Bill, which is being led by the Minister of Climate Change. That bill won't progress until there's work underway, but it won't progress until after the elections. Finally, the only other thing I wanted to mention that we, Jacinta's team, are bringing together around 34 funding recipients from the Te Manawa Te Wai Fund to meet in a conference within Rotorua next week. We're looking forward to that, and just the ability for those funding recipients to share some insights in how they're progressing with their individual projects, and hoping that those lessons will actually inform more broadly across other rōpū that are wanting to understand, well, what does Te Manawa Te Wai mean, and what are some of the learnings that come out of that. But that's all from me at this point in time, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Lorena. Questions, Councillor White?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much for your updates. That last point, Te Manawa Te Wai funding and sharing the insights and also, when is that happening and where? I'm just aware that you probably are. It was quite a major project that the regional council partnered with a number of iwi groups and cleaning up Waihi history. And I think it was using that fund. Is that the sort of thing you're looking for?
I might defer to Jacinta, because Jacinta's been organising that with her team, if that's okay.
Kia ora. So the Waihi kaupapa is a different one that sits outside Te Manawa Te Wai.
Sorry, but just in terms of that meeting, the other part of the issue doesn't give me.
So the conference is being held next Wednesday and Thursday this month.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I'll call for a member in a second. Oh, sorry, one more question.
The freshwater farm plan, the freshwater farm plan, as you see, needs to be certified and audited. I got wind of the group that's been formed for Kaitaka Wainga group. Is that associated with this?
I'm not sure, but I can certainly follow that up with you. I know that there are a number of farmers who've already got farm environmental plans, or that are already part of an industry program under that, and the idea was to build upon that, but I can certainly follow that up for you.
Thank you.
Call for a mover and a seconder that we received the verbal update. Moved by Rangiti, seeing the booking cheerleader. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, apologies, I skipped the Te Arawa Lakes Trust update, so Sueta, sorry for that. We're going to go back to item 8.6. How went the one?
Tēnā tātou e iwi nei, tēnei aku mihi nui ki a koutou, ko ai au he uri hau no te harangi te Ngāti Raupapa ki te tonga, e runga te aki tai o mo ki Te Arawa Lakes Trust as the Lakes Program Coordinator. Before I get into the report, I'd just like to acknowledge, as we're all aware, that Nikki's no longer with us, but as is felt at Te Arawa Lakes Trust, but also just acknowledging her massive contribution and legacy that she's left behind, not just with this group, but with the top in general and Te Arawa whānau and iwi. Whānau's not here, but I'm sure he's ready and willing and brave enough to step into this role and lead us forward as we go ahead. Also acknowledging Mariana, my friend, who's also in this room, I'm sure, familiar face to me. Also, just going on, obviously we've met the Total Weather Impact Collective team. I want to acknowledge particularly the new staff that have come in and hit the ground running with this project. I'm quite humble, but we already started getting into the mahi, so we were able to secure some funding from EPA in the form of environmental DNA kits, and that's going to help with one of our deliverables, which is implementing a water monitoring framework in the Rotorua Lake system. So actually some of those kits are going to be used in a Waiora Ki Tarawera project with Te Harangi Tribal Authority in the next couple of weeks. It's a tool that's relatively new, and I feel that our whānau hasn't really been introduced or had the time to workshop and understand how it's used within our system. So that's one of the aims with this funding and project that will be led by the Rotorua Collective to collectivise every around the system and monitor and understand what's done with the data from EDNA. So another one of the key things is that we've started to form a data working group with that system, and because the EDNA is talking about whakapapa really. So, how is that stored? What do we do with it? So having our own data working group is one of the tools that we've noticed within Te Arawa. We don't have our own system. A lot of the time we ask for data, we need to go to regional council or another stakeholder, and we want to develop our own system. So that's one of the key things that group has already begun implementing, which also, I'd also like to mention one up here around the lake level committee to do with climate change, that we must be including the Te Arawa climate change committee. The input is going to be crucial to that moving forward. This week we have begun to remove the UFI from some of our sites. So it's been a year and 7 months since we first installed them, which is pretty remarkable. The control material that's used, which is hessian, usually lasts maximum around 10 months. So that's a massive finding. We've found so far the preliminary data shows that it's been a very successful project. And as we go to remove from some of our lakes, we're also starting to, or we've put another UFI into Lake Tikitapu and continue to monitor the UFI at Kaipaitākanga. What we're doing around that project is building a case study that will be used to bring in resource, hopefully going forward as we upscale this project. A lot of the aquatic weed management that currently happens around boat ramps or biosecurity issues. It's not really related to cultural, hasn't taken into account the cultural needs of whānau and iwi. So what we want to do is upscale that, understand where the mahinga kai sites, and we have resource to pull it into those places. And one of the control tools is UFI. Another one that Te Arawa Lake Stress has taken over of recent is the aquatic spray program using dipot. And we've had a really successful case out of Rotorua Bay or on Lake Rotorua, where whānau have said this is where we practice taukoda or traditional harvesting of freshwater crayfish. The coda number is down, it's hard to harvest because of all the lake weed there. We've gone in and sprayed the site. Now when we pull up the taukoda, it's no longer hard to put in the line because obviously the weed's being controlled. Also having UFI up there is acted as a refuge for the coda at that site. So the coda numbers and the taukoda that have been brought up are actually demonstrating that yes, when we acknowledge what is important to us and we have the resource to deal with it, we have a successful outcome. So that's our case study. Along with that, we've been able to include some of the high schools and bring them out to that site. They've been constructing the whakaweku, which is the fern bundles that are used in the taukoda, and get actually them involved through gaining NCA credits. So we're hoping to keep implementing that with schools going forward. In terms of the catfish operations, it's been business as usual. The volunteer program is still bringing on more schools. Our operations team on the lake daily continue what we've noticed though, which has been really interesting. So the same amount of effort has gone into catching catfish since Te Arawa Lake Stress has taken over. However, this time last year we had 36,000 catfish caught. This year we're only at 11,000, so quite a significant decrease in the numbers of catfish being caught. Unfortunately, we don't know what the reason is at the moment. Hopefully it's a good reason. That's what we're meant to be doing. But it's something that we need to continuously monitor and understand what's going on, particularly around the lake levels, if that's having an effect. One of the things that we're also wanting to revisit is the incursion response plan that I'm sure Regional Council has already, should catfish go into the vulnerable lakes around Rotorua and Rotorua, so Okataina and Tarawera, and making sure that every hapu input into that response plan is first and foremost there and that we're involved along the way. So I mentioned the golden plan before. Yes, we've been involved with some of the surveillance so far. One of the missed opportunities that happened a couple of weeks ago, we actually had our Tarawera Impact Collective team join
who will whakapapa to Tarawera, Tuharangi, join other members from there in cultural monitoring, looking at kākahi beds. The same week, I believe EPI had contracted people to come in and surveillance for the golden tam, so completely missed opportunity in terms of bringing in mana whenua to do that surveillance or be part of that surveillance, especially considering should the golden tam come into our region, it's going to devastate our kākahi, which is what they were monitoring. So just want to put that out there. That's good news. To the Tūpoku Ngāwha Science Fair is, we had a successful run last year. This year it's double the amount of schools, double the amount of entries, so it's set to be a really big event. We're really excited about everyone that's involved. It's in the end of July. Yeah. And we've got scientists from all over the Motu coming to join us and showcase some of the work that happens in the lake. So a bit of a collaboration where somebody can get involved and showcase what they're doing, and then they can speak with scientists that are also doing other things. Some of the members from Rotorua who are working with us on the Fish Futures program and have been working with Tarawera Whānau and our Impact Collective team monitoring the kōrero, I'm going to be here showcasing some of the work that we've done so far. Also a recent relationship that's been established with Victoria University and Ngāti Rongoa Iwi Trust is looking at, they've got a remotely operated vehicle, which you might have seen in the news recently, but it's an unmanned one, so it goes into the lake and it can map where the CO2 vents are and monitor the CO2 that's coming out of those vents. The purpose of that is obviously to understand what's happening down there in terms of volcanic activity. It would be a way of better understanding volcanic activity and also notifying the community whether we were close to a catastrophe or something of so they're also coming up and bringing their ROV for the kids to have a look at. And in terms of our wetland crew, we last month we planted 5,000 plants, which is awesome, which will enhance the Whakako Hornero wetland. We also held a workshop with Cawthron inviting, we had Te Arawa Rotorua Iwi Trust members there, we had Iwi members there, looking at microalgae and how to isolate and grow and just having a better understanding and relationship with algae in our lakes, where a lot of the time it's just around algal blooms. The research that this group are hoping to do is looking at the nutritional and medicinal benefits of algae, like spirulina. It's a high protein, so it's the novel research is looking at different sources of protein. This is a part of climate change and understanding that within our lakes, because of all the geothermal activity, we have high diversity of climate, and so the expectation is that we would have quite novel species of algae, and just understanding what whānau want to do in that space in terms of research. And just adding on to that, so Te Arawa Lakes Trust went into supported a joint bid fund to MBIE with Waikato Uni to look at climate change. So I've been notified that it's gone through the first round and it's successful, and if we secure that, then there'll be room for us to bring in a research role within Te Arawa Lakes Trust, because climate change and understanding our lakes has a lot of research, and we kind of need that within our organisation. But I agree.
Thank you, Samira. There's a lot in that report. Any questions, Councillor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really impressed and very pleased with the report. We've gone from capacity building, bringing in our young people, working with the schools to innovative ideas, and you're taking the lead. It's just a wonderful thing I see here. It's the community, in this case, we are taking the lead, and I think the community, if they took their lead, they can have the ability to take the lead, can lead it out. And we as an institution simply support and watch it happen and let it work. So that's what I'm taking from this, with all of the things you're doing. So, it's not a question, it's just a congratulations, carry on. I know it's at our table in the regional council, about the wonderful work that you guys are doing. And the support is well rewarded, I mean, gee, we can't do this. I want to say to that degree. So you can, and you're proven as a good on. Keep going.
Yeah. And I'd just like to acknowledge that actually Arawa had the solutions, and we were there at the Science Fair last year. When we show up to these events, they're already inventing things that we're paying people lots of money to invent. I mean, there's going to be, yes, we have these scientists that are bringing in a $150,000 robot thing that they've made, but our Whangatari already produced one. It's really amazing to see, when given the chance, that actually they've got the solutions.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate you as well, and just, since you've taken over things like more work in the Catfish area, we always get positive feedback from the communities there, but even the weed spraying, and even from the backyard community, I keep getting really positive feedback from our ex-communities about what you guys are doing, and I think that comes back to you're more approachable than Lucas was. You kind of understand, you're looking at better areas and stuff. So I always see really positive feedback when you go out spraying, whereas before it used to be, so great work.
So Sarah Fuddy could have done the comms plan for the spray program, so she's done a message on it.
There's a question from me, just going back to the CO2, exploring the CO2. Are there potential environmental impacts if the CO2 concentrations are too high? Fish start dying, just help me understand.
So, worst case scenario, it's happened overseas. So the CO2 will build up in the lake to a certain density. At that point, it can flip and be released into the environment. And there's been cases overseas where that's actually devastating, killed all people, livestock, animals within a village. So yeah, very extreme events. It's worst case scenario.
I just on the situation of CO2 sequestration. The Rotorua here have been now talking with the International Conservancy Group, as well as carbon, I think it's called Terra, and looking at assessing the carbon sequestration aspects of carbon sequestration relative to wetlands and carbon sequestration relative to irrigation. And that's basically to monitor that. So, just putting that on as a thought that you're planting water, we can ask yourself a number of others. The benefit of that in terms of the ETS contribution is something to potentially be considered.
Yeah, actually, so we've deployed our vessel Coda to go out with the team from Victoria University just last week with Ngāti Rongomaewe Trust, and they've just surface level monitoring where the vents are compared to where the vents aren't within Lake Rotorua. Huge amount of carbon coming up. Yeah, so definitely indicates what we thought was happening.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate you and the team for the great work that you're doing. I'm really proud of you and for continuing, like you said, even with Nikki leaving. The work is still going on and mahi, and it's really great to see that you're continuing the work. And the other thing is that I think we just should get on and do it. And we support you and let you know that we are able to do it. But so we know the team.
Just before I call for a mover to second, if staff can note the comments that we've made about the Arawa Climate Change Group being part of the potential working party. So just consider that in the process. Okay, calling for a mover and second, please. See this report. Okay, moved and Councillor Brown. Those in favour, aye. Against, carried. Thank you, sir. Okay, moving on to the update report from Rotorua Lakes Council. Stavros.
Thank you, Chair. Go very briefly onto some of the matters in our update report. Rotorua 20 scheme is progressing. As you see in the report, some 260 on-program installations on East Rotorua have been completed today. Fortunately, the program is slowing down and becoming a bit more costly at the moment because of the lake levels and high groundwater tables. Every installation at the moment requires dewatering before every installation. However, looking into the progress at the moment, putting costs aside, the completion of East Rotorua by the end of this calendar year, or close enough, so that we would have completed somewhere in the region of 2,500 to 3,000 articulations by the end of the year. And as I said, early meetings for the purpose of this water quality group report. We know that with the completion of all the articulation schemes, somewhere in the region of 2.5 million litres of untreated sewage no longer entered into the lakes. So that's a positive outcome. As you know, too, you have some discussion later on about the Minister's decision and the impacts onto that particular last of the articulation schemes. I will leave it to you to have this open discussions. Again, the Rotorua City wastewater treatment plant is now in its commencement processes for the upgrade. And as you said earlier, is consistent with the projections made from our future development strategy, the future housing demands and expectations for the city. Obviously, to be accommodated by the new upgraded treatment plant, which is in the process of the next 3 years. Two key ingredients to that, obviously, is the volume of processing to be achieved, which is going to be almost triple to what the current plant can do. Nutrient removals and disinfection will take place at the plant itself, and obviously that will satisfy both the district's housing needs, but also will meet the contribution to the Rotorua Lake's quality targets and goals. Arawa scheme, again, stage 1 is in progress. I think from the last conversation I had with our project team, somewhere in the region of about 4.5 kilometers of ground thrusting pipelines have been inserted. The funding and deal with the Ministry of the Environment requires substantial progress by the end of the calendar year, and obviously we comply with those timeframes agreed in the deeds. Stage 2 right now is into the full procurement process, and tenders have been called. We expect the tenders to be received by early July, and the recommendation go back to the council, our council in late July, early August for the next stage 2. Rotorua, a very sad case, obviously, with especially the current lake levels and the declining TI and the increasing septic seepage into the water. I don't think we will say anything else other than it's very unfortunate that I've not been able to articulate in the communities, and of course that contributes to a declining water quality into the lake. Rotorua Area Comprehensive Stormwater Resource Concerns, again, that needs to be looked into in conjunction with the future development strategy, because housing developments rely heavily on satisfying flood risk mitigation expectations, and obviously we're working with the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, where we're spending about $130 million in grant attenuation projects, and the whole idea of there is actually to mitigate any perceived and identified model flood risks in those areas. We are in the first year of a 7-year program for that. The resource concerns will aim to demonstrate the modeling expectations of the performance of the systems, but also the quality treatment that attenuation can achieve. And again, that's in the context of a a discussion about a joint working party to consider the future climate change effects and risks posed by increasing rainfall, increasing lake levels, and potential options to manage a combination of all the system approaches that would have impact in a joint directive. The rest of the stuff of the updates regarding planning policy and strategy obviously have been primarily reported by Damon earlier in the FTA's reports debate. I won't go to repeat it. I'll leave my report up to that stage. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments? Councillor White? Oh, Winters, sorry.
Thank you, Stavros. The letter from Tamati Coffee that's been on the table today, Mr. Chairman, he asks about the sewerage installation of the and in Stavros' report he said that the reticulation proposal is now on hold pending required funding. So who's going to be reporting back to Tamati? Who's going to be reporting back to Tamati on a response to Tamati's letter? And also the other letter, Mr. Chairman, while I'm speaking, the letter to the Koiki on Okiri 8 floodgate operation. My understanding that the gates have been open full doors for the last 6 months. So I don't think we can open them much wider than what they already are. So there's only one plug hole down into the Kaituna, and that's it, and it's been full open for 6 months. So I don't think we can. So my question, Mr. Chairman, is that we write back to both of these letter holders with a response from Stavros to say, both of you are on hold in the Okiri gates have been fully open for a long time. That was my understanding.
Yep. So just coming back to the letters, I don't think you need to necessarily respond to the letter. So I'm talking to Stavros in terms of the answer to that. I think what I'd like to do is instruct staff to develop a letter, a response letter, addressing the questions that are raised.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Unless you wanted to say something about it.
Well, I know the MP Tamati Coffee's letter was to the regional council. So I don't think I represent the regional council. I don't think we'll actually report the regional, but we have the regional council. Second thing, question about the switch, well, I have to respond to MP Tamati Coffee and refer him to the Minister for the Environment about his decision for a trail. And then declined to provide funding for a trail. Leave it at that.
Thanks, Chair. I just think we've got to be careful that the roles and responsibilities are clear. So earlier today, in terms of setting up that working group, my understanding of the discussion was that working group would be the vehicle that dealt with both these issues. In terms of getting feedback both to the Koiki as well as to the Rotorua people. So I mean, it's up to you.
I think these letters they need a response to the group will be established. The letters the way I read them are addressed essentially to the strategy group, even if regional councils are told that it's underneath the strategy groups. My view is that we need to respond as the strategy group. So what I'd like is they've started to draft letter, circulate that with people. Any further questions of Stavros or comments? I'll call for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Winters. Councillor Brown. Thank you.
It's your latest council report.
Okay. Arawa Lakes program status.
That's okay, I'll just proceed from here. Everyone's just got my big lines up. We'll go down there. We're down there, sorry. Okay, good morning, Makoto. Ko hawe prae to Rotorua. Here to do a kitchen senator, Tuku Tū Mahi, Tū Moana, the Regional Council. I'm here this morning to present a program status update, and this is just a requirement of the deed of funding with the Crown and this group for the Lakes program, for those deed-funded activities. So that's the purpose of this report. So I've given you a full report and includes a dashboard update on all the key deed-funded and non-deed-funded activities across the Arawa Lakes catchments. So I've just got a list of some key things to mention here. First being that all health warnings across the Arawa Lakes are now lifted, so over that summer period we had a number of health warnings that prevented contact recreation on Rotorua, Rotorua, parts of Rotorua, and Rotorua. So that was now lifted. The driver of those was really that intense rainfall, and I've got a slide on that later. Just the record intense and persistent rainfall we have had over the last 12 months driving phosphorus loss to those lakes. It's extremely difficult to counter that. We are due to have a 3-year plan prepared for as per the deed of funding, but we discussed it with the program steering group, and we've decided to leave that until the Arawa Lakes Trust review of this group is finished, and also both councils are going to start preparing their long-term plans soon. So we'd rather let those processes happen, and we're going to get in place to produce a 3-year plan for this program. In terms of the 50-tonne engineering solutions, and referring to Rosemary's slide earlier about the integrated framework for Lake Rotorua, which these engineering solutions are part of, we have a rural drain wetland to start to be constructed shortly and over summer, which is really exciting, and we're actively working to secure further wetland sites and quite close to at least one more. So that's really, we're really starting to make progress. This is a long-term project, we are starting to make progress there. And also referring to Rosemary's report about looking for new strategies for that second 50 tonnes of the incentive scheme. And Rosemary had some possibilities around that we discussed earlier as well. Stavros has mentioned that the Tarawera and Rotorua reticulation schemes are progressing. I've got some slides later just of the high water level issues at Rotorua, but that Rotorua reticulation that Stavros has mentioned, the mains are in the ground. There isn't funding for those further on-site systems. So the community is really, Andy and I have been out in that community quite a bit, and they are really keen to get reticulation now. So it would be awesome to be able to jump on that because there has been some hesitance before, so that they see now the benefit of weed harvesting and phosphorus logging alum dosing at Rotorua are not possible due to high lake levels. Our alum plant is actually totally flooded, so you can see that if you drive up Manawahi Road on the left, just after the soda springs, if you see a little plant here with a Manu fence, it's totally underwater. And I just also refer to the letter from this partnership that went to the residents of Rotorua within that potential flooding risk zone in May, and then following that we had the meeting that was chaired by Phil, so thank you Phil for all of your hard work there. We've been actively working, the council staff have been actively working with Phil and people in the community to help them with the issue. So just moving on to, I thought it was important just to brief you all on the issues being faced by residents at Rotorua and non-Rotorua of high lake levels. And this graph is just to show you just the ridiculous nature of the rainfall that we've had over the last 12 months, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So we've had 2 to 3 times. So the light blue bar on those graphs, sorry, you probably can't see it, it isn't representing the report, but you probably can't quite see it. The light blue bar on that graph is the average historic rainfall. The other line, the green line, is the it will be the 2021, I think it's 20, yeah, there's it'll be the 2022 or 2023, 2021 rainfall. So we've had a ridiculous amount of rain in the last 12 months, effectively. Sorry, I can't quite read it, but just showing you, we've had 2 to 3 times the historic average rainfall over the last 12 months, which has caused these issues with high lake levels and with our ability to manage our flows on those lakes due to phosphorus loss. So here's some photos, just quickly. You'll notice the car yard there, you'll remember that from Rotorua. So that is now drained. So Andy Brewer and my team and some district council road staff have assisted with draining that back across the road, and that's helped. There's 5 properties, including some elderly people that live in those properties along there. So that's helped them stay in their homes and have access. So if you drive past them now, there's a pump constantly running back to the lake. The property on the left, that's at Rotorua on Tom Wilson Road. The caravan that's driving through the bottom of Manawakea Road there, I think. That road is now, as Steve was mentioned earlier, that's now closed because the water level is too high there. So access to Rotorua is now around the back of Maniatutu Road, I think. And then the property at the bottom that is at Rotorua, on the lake, not far away from the campground. So that's now, those properties along there, including the campground, it is the campground, sorry, right, are now totally underwater. So this is a property, I've asked the property owner, I've got permission from him to share these photos. This is a property at Kawaha Point on Rotorua. So that's the before photo on the left and the current after photo. So there's the lake levels of Rotorua are also at the 1972 peak, as well as those at Rotorua. Some more photos of Rotorua, Tomlinson Road, and this is at Tumai Road at Rotorua. So all of these properties the residents, we did a walk around with Tamati Coffee and the residents out there a week or so ago. This land here was flooded in the 1970s. There was old batches on there on that particular part of Tumai Road. Those batches were moved off and moved further up the road following that high lake level, but recently have been rebuilt on. So the residents were raised that with me. There's a property at Kennedy Bay in Rotorua which has been raised so that it's been put up on stilts, the lake's now underneath it. Members might remember that property because when we did our boat trip on the lake at Rotorua in February, it's right beside the boat ramp here, so the lake was encroaching on it then. This is just some photos of so the letter we sent in May talked about a potential surface overflow from Rotorua to Rotorua. This is the overflow point. So you come through, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the Māori name for the lagoon at the end of Rotorua. But when you come into the Rotorua township, there's the lagoon, and so it flows through, the lake levels come right up, flows through there, through Dock Scenic Reserve, and then down into this. There's been a concrete sump and a pipe put in the 1970s because they were obviously anticipating then that it might do it. It didn't, but they were anticipating that it did it. So we have cleared the blackberry from that. It's on Māori owned land. We've cleared the blackberry from that and done some preparation works in case it does start to surface overflow, so that just making it, trying to prevent it from eroding the land. That was a particular concern at the public meeting. So you can imagine that this land is now farmed, so previously it would have been bush, native bush like you see in the background there. So, erosion is possible if there's a surface overflow. So this infrastructure is just to protect from erosion. We aren't lowering the overflow level at all. We aren't toying with that. It's just, this infrastructure is simply to protect that land from erosion if an overflow occurs. I think that was, this was just another photo of Rotorua. So this is like a Bennett Road at Copeton. So we had a really high wind day, and I had a number of calls, and the district council did too, from members of the community who've lived here for 50 years and have never seen the water coming up on their lawn and on the road like it was then. So it was just an unusual wind, just bringing water like way up onto all of these properties. And Stavros, I included this because this is a photo of Stavros's, and he mentioned this a few times. This is going into Rotorua, isn't it, Stavros? So this is the work that has to be done, the sheet piling that has to be done to de-water the area where the on-site systems for the sewage circulation are being installed. So it's significant extra cost, and it's particularly difficult. And so if we were to install on-site systems at Rotorua at the current time, this is what you also face there, because those septic tanks are all totally flooded. And the land is totally saturated. So I just thought I'd include that because I thought that's a really good photo. Thank you, Stavros. So,
any questions or comments on Alan's report? Okay, Phil?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for your report, Helen. Just a couple of things. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you and your team and Stavros' team for that joint Rotorua response team work that you guys are doing. It's great working incredibly well, getting those messages out to that community and just feedback on them. They do really appreciate it, so thank you for that. Just in your report, you mentioned about having to do a 3-year plan and saying that you were waiting until both councils have been through their long-term plan process. Wouldn't it be better to actually have some ideas of what you're wanting to do around the lakes over the next 3 years, so that both councils could actually be aware of what they should be including in their long-term plan budgets? I'm just worried that nothing will be put aside with doing water quality improvement, lake improvement, and we do need to keep on doing that.
The 3-year plan I referred to is simply under the deed of funding, and so it's allocated to 2 projects at the moment, which is the incentive scheme and the engineering solutions, the wetland construction. So it would just be a plan in relation to deed funding at this stage, but I think your point is correct. And so, yeah, those things are definitely going to be included in the Regional Council's long-term plan, including the regional park that was talked about. We're not certainly going to be moving that to be included. So yes, I think before I even launched into doing a 3-year plan, I want some guidance from this group through that review about what direction they wanted to take for all the staff at the organisations, I think. Otherwise we're sort of just coming up with things. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I think the thing is that we do need to keep these issues in front of all councillors on regional and lakes council. Some of them don't really know the issues, so we do continually need to keep people aware of what's happening and what needs to happen for the Rotorua lakes. And there's still a lot of work to go, and we saw that with the report back on the incentives funding earlier on, just what I heard we had to get over. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Thank you, Helen, for your presentation. I'm just you talk about the heavy rainfall, we all understand that, and it leading to phosphorus loss. But I just wonder whether you've looked at the erosion that the high lake levels are causing and how much that contributes to the phosphorus loss and the impacts of that sediment ending up in the lake, particularly with Lake Rotorua. We see the wave action, particularly on the north side, and the erosion that that's causing. I wonder if you could speak to that, please.
Yeah, so phosphorus is lost to the streams and the lake through soil erosion, so it's attached to the soil, and that's how phosphorus is lost. And that's how we get it out of the dosing, because we use a flock drill to blind the sediment, which has phosphorus attached to it. Deposits on the stream bed. So I understand with erosion, we're looking at, when you're thinking about phosphorus loss, the concern is around the topsoil loss. So mass erosion doesn't, you're getting the phosphorus from the topsoil layer, the organic layer. Yeah, so definitely erosion and high rainfall causes erosion, which contributes to phosphorus loss. And so a lot of the plan change 10 work is around managing those critical source areas for phosphorus. So retiring land that's susceptible to erosion, that's a big part of the critical source areas, dealing with your riparian margins, your water seeps, things like that. So there's been a lot of work done to retire land in the Lake Rotorua catchment to reduce that phosphorus loss. In the last 5 years, there was a report presented to as part of the PCT Science Review and presented to the Lakes Water Society Symposium last year that kind of covered that off. Just an incredible amount of work done by the farming community to reduce that potential in the lake catchment, but lots more to do.
Yeah, sorry, the second part of that was the amount of sediment that the high lake levels, the erosion from the lake edges, and the effects of that sediment on the lakes. Do you have an opinion on how much soil is being eroded into the lake in terms of quantity, and then the effects of that soil in the lake?
I would definitely be contributing. I don't know how much, but certainly any erosion will contribute to phosphorus. Any erosion of soil matter will contribute to phosphorus availability in the lake.
Thank you for your report. You mentioned that Rotorua lake levels have been at their heights, so they are quite high. And that's despite the fact that the gates are open full. So it's really at its capacity and almost maxing out. Is there a thought or danger of it getting worse and the lake levels coming up higher also, despite the fact that the gates are open full?
Yeah, so for Lake Rotorua, the gates don't control the level of Lake Rotorua. It's the geometry, the size and capacity of the Wahau channel. That's the limitation to getting water out of Lake Rotorua. The Wahau weir at the top of the channel, that is of no use at high lake levels. That was put in. The purpose of that consent was to maintain lake levels in low conditions so that the lake could be navigated by tourist operations like the large Lake Queen and others that relied on navigation of Lake Rotorua. That was the purpose of the weir. It doesn't provide any relief to high lake levels. I had some photos of that which I could show, but I'm happy to circulate them. So the stock logs, which are not logs, they're metal bars basically, they have been out since for a year. They've been for a year, so they don't help in high lake levels. It's the geometry of the Wahau channel that's the limitation to getting to relieving levels of Lake Rotorua. That is, as you know, with the work we've been doing with people at Tānaka and Amodia, it's really causing them lots of problems with the water coming down that channel.
Yeah, it is a big worry for that part of the world that I belong to. The other channel, even the geometry you're just talking about. Yeah, it's a hard find in terms of solutions. I guess that's what we're facing at the moment. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add a comment too, just about the flow down the Ohio Channel. At the moment, the flow is incredibly high. It's actually higher than we thought was physically possible. It is absolutely booming down there. It is amazing.
Any further questions or comments? Yep, Jimmy.
Thanks, Chair. Look, a real minor point, Helen, but when I read some of the initiatives in terms of land use change and stuff, one in here that I'll pick on is the, let me just find it here. It's only $20,000, but it is the plantain trial. And I just hope, because the stuff that I read, this is not new. Farmers have been using plantain for the last decade. It's been picked up in terms of its usage. There's heaps of science out there from ag research and a whole lot of other science providers about the benefits of it. I just wonder why we're trying to reinvent the wheel. I know you didn't put much effort into it. It's only 20 grand, and you're saying that one of the providers of beef and lamb is not up to it. There's a lot of science out there already in terms of the benefit of plantain.
Can I just ask what Rosemary's across there, and I'm sorry, I'm not, so if it's okay for Rosemary, she's got more detail than I have to respond.
So this was specifically to trial plantain in the Lake Rotorua catchment, and it's 65 bits of land that we are actually supporting. It hasn't started yet, so it was to plant plantain on a particular farm in the catchment. I understand that this project is proposing.
That's right. No further comments or questions? That's from me.
Happy to move the reports.
Thank you. Let's go on to this in a second, please. Councillor Brown, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, final agenda item, Central Freshwater Policy Update. Jim, to present on that.
Juma, for those that don't know me. I'm just coming to give you a quick update on our comms and engagement that's underway at the moment. So not too much has changed since your last update from Joe Watt's last meeting, but we have engagement underway. We've had one community event held at the lake so far, and we have another one following this meeting. If anyone would like to attend, we've got another 2 dates scheduled for the 8th of July and 22nd of September, specifically for the lakes management area. We have feedback open at the moment, and the 3 main ways you can feedback is online through Participate, in person at our community engagement events, or we have a hard copy version. We also have a Freshwater Flash newsletter, which updates people on the latest and what's going on, and our next engagement activities. We also are running Tainga Te Whenua engagement. We've had one Hui Rocky event so far. We had Councillor White was hosting. We have another one on the 16th of August. We continue to invite engagement with Tainga Te Whenua and have ongoing projects with some groups. Last week, Te Mana Tuai statements were received from the Freshwater Working Group, coordinated by Te Papa Arawa. This is just a pretty picture of our lovely communications material, which is available at the moment. This booklet is specific to the Rotorua Te Arawa Lakes Freshwater Management Area, and I have a few if anyone would like to take one home. And it gives you pretty much what we're up to at the moment, our initial thoughts really for community and Te Whenua feedback. It talks about visions, outcomes, the issues we've identified within this area, and some possible rules and management options that we're considering. There's also a regional document just explaining that national policy statement process and some region-wide changes. So in this document, just to give you a heads up if you haven't looked at it yet, some of the issues we've identified are the water quality not always being safe for recreation, so similar to what Helen was discussing earlier with health warnings on the lakes, our ecosystem health bottom lines not being met for some monitored lakes and stream sites, and some of that uncertainty as to whether it's from natural processes or human activities. So we have some further research being undertaken by the University of Waikato for some of those questions. We do have some worsening trends in phosphorus and nitrogen for some of the lakes, and everyone's aware of the pest species concerns we've got in the lakes, and some of them not meeting the water quality community aspirations and TLI targets. Some of those policy options we are looking at, some of the big ones are improving ecosystem health and human contact values in lakes Rotorua, and Okaro, whole worsening trends in the majority of the lakes, and some of the management options we're considering. Freshwater farm plans, which MEP was talking about earlier, will be rolled out, and how they interact with our regional plan, and existing nutrient management plans like those under PC10. So we considered capping nutrient inputs. So for some of our Rotorua lakes at the moment, there are already limits on nitrogen and phosphorus losses, but that's not the case for all lakes. So looking at restricting further land use change in all catchments, enabling sediment control ones, and encouraging habitat restoration, additional rules potentially for steep land, forestry, stock exclusion, point source discharges, and improving urban discharges. So this one just indicates where we have the biggest potential changes for certain contaminants. So the main four being nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, and E. coli. So just highlighting where that's going to be our biggest challenge, and where the current state of the lakes is actually in pretty good shape. This is just a plug for our participate page, so if you go online to participate, you have the opportunity to feedback on the freshwater management areas that you care about.
In Parkai? No? I'll call for a mover and a seconder, I guess. Anita, you moved, seconder, please. Seconders, those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. Okay, so we did have the one item that for consideration items, one on the agenda that was the letter from Minister Parker. So happy to have just a general discussion, but just want to note that according to the standing orders, we can't make a resolution on it at this stage, but happy for a general discussion to occur. Okay, Chair Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm not going to, I don't want to relitigate this letter, but my view is that a responsible governance group, having reviewed and taken on board this minister's letter, would stand back from this and say, do we have, or have we lost some reputational value in terms of this ending up where it has? In my view, the answer to that is yes. And I think clearly in terms of some of the content or the process sitting behind this is a different view between two of the parties. There's Frank, there's Rotorua Lakes Council, and there's ourselves, the Regional Council, and I think this is an ideal opportunity for yourself as the independent chair to take a lead on this. And my suggestion to you would be at some stage, earlier rather than later, that we have a non-public discussion about this and try and re-establish the reputation that this organisation, which involves three of us, should have, not only with the Minister, but with officials.
Thank you, Chair Leader. Just one comment I want to make to that is that in the strategy review process, I have encouraged Taiwan to look specifically at how we work as partners, and in that process, the opportunity for us to have one conversation. From my perspective, I think there's a need to reset perhaps the values, principles, how we work as a partnership, and there's some, I suppose, some technical protocol that flow after that way that we respond to external parties. Did you have another one? No? Okay, so that's noted. Also, just in terms of the response, because I'm conscious we haven't actually given any response at all. So I would like to start making a move on that. Initially, I'd like to work with staff in drafting a letter. I'll share that with members before it goes back. We need a little bit of time to do things. Any further comments or questions on this item? No? Okay, in which case we've reached the end of our meeting. Thank you members, thank you presenters, and those who have been to observe the meeting. Can I call on Anita here to close our meeting with a click, please?
Te video te whakairi e te ke te kōrumi te wā, te ara te tūruki tōra